Hey, gang, it's me, Dr. Steve, and this is another episode of Operation Ground Zero Win Pennsylvania, where each and every day we bring you the latest election news coming out of this most important key swing state. We have with us today one of my all time favorite election data analysts, Seth Keshel. You can check out Seth's amazing work on his Substack called Captain K's Corner, which you can visit just by clicking on the link below and subscribing there. What Seth does, what I really love about his analysis, is he cross-references voter registration data with past election data and finds all kinds of amazing predictive patterns and indicators. He does so much more, but that was the one thing that really caught my eye and we'll be talking about today. So, Seth, welcome. It's an honor to have you here, sir.
Steve, thank you so much for having me on the show. We've been looking to get this to roll for a couple days now, and I'm glad that we're going to do it.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's great to have. I've been very excited to talk to you, especially about Pennsylvania. I was mentioned to you before the interview. That's actually how I discovered you. A colleague of mine sent me your Substack article on Pennsylvania, and that's when I first started noticing your impressive analysis. I started citing you in my videos. So I'd love to just start, if you don't mind, with your methodology, because you focus on voter registration trends. That's kind of for me, that's a bit of your shtick. That's what attracted me to you. You look at voter registration trends. That seems to ground your work. So if you would, just explain to us the significance of voter registration in election forecasting, and then explain how that relates particularly to Pennsylvania.
Absolutely, and I forwarded your producer the graphics, of course, which are going to be up on the screen here. And Pennsylvania voter registration is an important indicator, and it is all over the place. Look, so as an intelligence officer, I didn't rise to the rank where I'm going to be considered a spook or sitting in Washington D.C. and all over strategic intelligence. I was a tactical intelligence officer. I served 6 years. I was a captain, did my time, spent a tour in combat, got out. And my job was to take multiple disciplines of intelligence. In intelligence work, you've got signals intelligence, human intelligence, you have open source intelligence, which is very key. And that's kind of what I do now. And molding all of the inputs and all the what's gathered together is called intelligence fusion. So I view election forecasting as an intelligence fusion operation. I don't completely think polling is worthless. I think that the mainstream media rigs the top lines of polls to swing a
Right.
narrative, to
Right.
suppress the votes of the side they don't want to win, to try to convince fit sitters to join the victor.
And
And
also to raise money for them as well, so they can show the polls to the donors. Yep.
and to demoralize. So that there's
Yes.
definitely a purpose. Now, not all of them are bad. There's some of the mainstream media pollsters are better than others, and now you can see them all hurting. And what they're doing, hurting, HERDING, and they're going to be hurting too for rigging. But they heard the results at the end to reflect reality. So now you see that on the Real Clear Politics average, it's a tie. So Harris no
Right.
longer has a national popular vote lead. So the signal is that it looks like Trump may very well win the popular vote. So this is what's going on with the polling. But I look deeper into the polls, into crosstabs data, because I understand the trends of the various demographic groups. And when I see constantly tight numbers that always match up, where Trump's over 15% of the black vote, he's over 25% of the black male vote, he's over 40% of the Latino vote, and he's got a bigger share of the white working class than he had last time and probably in 2016, then that helps inform what I'm reading in the voter registration trends. And in Pennsylvania, voter registration by party is the most accurate predictor of the direction of the next presidential election. So it's apples to apples. I do presidential data. It's the bigger
Right.
turnout, it's the more partisan turnout, and it trends over time. In 2008, the Democrats had a lead in registrations of more than 1.2 million. It was D plus 14% and some change. And that predicted that was a big move left in registration from 2004. You can see it right there on the screen. It predicted Obama's win of more than 10 points in PA. And that was the biggest landslide for anybody in Pennsylvania since Lyndon Johnson in 1964. And since then, what's happened is the Democrats have become the anti working class party, and they've become against resource extraction. So mining, they've come against coal, they've come against all sorts of fossil fuels. And what that's done in Pennsylvania, especially, it's made the white working class Democrat change sides. And it started in 2012. You can see the registrations for Democrats went down slightly, but the GOP also lost membership. It was a race to the bottom. So what happened for Romney versus Obama was that white working class vote stayed home. Obama
Mhm.
lost 300,000 plus in Pennsylvania in 2012. Romney didn't get to gain much, but even then, you had the margin cut in half. So the trend had already begun before Trump showed up. In 2016, Trump actually increased GOP recruitment and membership. There's interest now in the Republican Party, and the declines for the Democrats continued on. So what you had is Trump flipping the state, and it was predictable because you had a 5.4% Obama over Romney margin, and then a big move of 3 points towards the right for the
Hmm.
Republicans. Now it's still Democrats plus 10.5 when Trump won the state in 2016. One of the big tells that 2020 wasn't on the up and up is that Pennsylvania moved another 3+ points in registration to the right. And Trump had an even larger gain in Pennsylvania in 2020. But of course, the narrative of Scranton Joe, the Irish Catholic from northeastern
Right.
Pennsylvania, plus all the days to count ballots, edged him out by 80,000 ballots. But
Right.
Trump still ran 605,000 to the right of the Democrat registration advantage, which is substantial. So you can see in that final column that Pennsylvania always votes to the right of its Democrat voter registration advantage. And the
Right.
key today is that registration advantage is now under 300,000.
Dang.
So if
Yeah.
Trump runs as far right of that as he did last time, then Trump has Pennsylvania by more than a quarter million votes, which
Wow.
by my math is a margin of 4% or more. So Pennsylvania is resembling to me a low grade version of Ohio 2016, where this is a fist fight. No matter who's running, all of a sudden it's a safe Republican state. Pennsylvania is not a Republican state; it is a Trumpy state, and
Hmm.
that's
Hmm.
the thing that
Hmm.
the Republican establishment has to understand is they've only got a few counties in the state. Most of them are in the southeast that would back Republican candidates more than they would a Trump type candidate.
Right.
So Pennsylvania's registration data shows that there's a blowout brewing in Pennsylvania, and I'm really not sure that that can be turned back this time, especially
Can I?
since mail voting
Can I?
numbers are much more favorable for Trump than they were last time.
It's stunning, and I mean, I just really wanna underscore that you had 605,000 votes to the right of the Democrat, voter registration advantage. The Democrat voter registration advantage is now under 300,000. That would mean Trump could actually lose half, right, or just not even get half that, vote to the right, and he would still win.
Absolutely. So
Dang.
that's why you see some of these polls that are Trump plus 3, Trump plus 4. And I really don't believe that Josh Shapiro wants Kamala Harris to win Pennsylvania.
I agree with you 1,000% on that. Same with Gretchen in Michigan. Yeah.
Yeah, so Shapiro is very ambitious, and it can just be as simple as ordering Philly and Pittsburgh to run a tight ship, calling off the dogs on the personal ballot collection network, and you've got it for Trump. The same thing in Michigan. And you can break down Pennsylvania further by county. Luzerne County in the Northeast used to be the bellwether in Pennsylvania presidentially from
Right.
1936 to 2016. Everybody that carried Luzerne County carried Pennsylvania's electoral votes. So Trump won Luzerne in 16, he won Pennsylvania. Now, the safest and most secure election in 2020 of all time debunked the Luzerne bellwether. So Trump carried Luzerne, supposedly lost Pennsylvania. So the goalposts have moved, and now the bellwethers are Northampton and Erie counties. And I've run the numbers on those. I sent you Northampton on the slide,
Yep,
and you
I've
can
got
see
them.
that the Dems are clinging to a voter registration advantage of just over 11,000.
It's
Trump
their
on
lowest ever. Yeah.
Yeah, Trump on average has run 25,000 to the right of the Democrat voter registration advantage in Northampton County. I think that whether you're taking the Republican average of 6 cycles or the Trump average, you're looking at a win in Northampton County probably between 5 and 8 points for Donald
Wow.
Trump. So Pennsylvania's voter registration trend is very predictive, and I can prove it looking back at the cycles going all the way back. And if I went back before 2000 with the data, I'm sure I would find the same trends.
Dang. What do you, am I right that the most significant movement is happening in Eastern Pennsylvania? I think it was Barris who was arguing that California Kamala, she just simply could never compete in places like Lackawanna County, the old, the way old Scranton Joe could. And I think he said something about between 2016 and 2020, Western and mid Pennsylvania didn't change too much. That 80,000 plus vote tended to come from Eastern Pennsylvania. Is that what you're seeing as well?
Yeah, my deeper research into the darker corners of the 2020 election reveals what looks like substantial ballot trafficking, probably across the border from New Jersey in Eastern
Mm,
PA. Of course, that's proximal to the metro, Philadelphia metro. Western PA has been on a Republican trend for over 2 decades. So when Obama won PA by more than 10 points in 2008, most of Western Pennsylvania trended right for John McCain. That's how strong that trend of steel country is away from the Democrats, that it was even present in 2008. A lot of those smaller, less densely populated or population declining counties in Western PA are almost maxed out for Trump. So he's gonna squeeze, he's gonna wring that rag out some more. But as far as population goes, you're gonna find bigger shifts in margin in the East. And I want to encourage people that Philadelphia County is
Hmm.
hemorrhaging Democrat membership.
That's
And
right. Philadelphia Inquirer had a whole article on it.
no, it's not about winning Philly County. This is why the Republicans
Right.
frustrate so many people, because if they could just dent Philadelphia County by 10 points, you'd
Right.
have
Right.
a much
Margin.
bigger, a much different ballgame in Pennsylvania. And I think that Trump will do very well with black men relative to previous performances. I think that they're going to have lower turnout of Democrat voters in Philly. And then the collar counties, it looks to me like the momentum is with Trump, even though the three of them have shifted left over the last 4 years. The last month's worth of updates have shown movement and momentum towards Trump. So I think you're going to be able to minimize losses there and blow it out in central and eastern PA. And the mail ballots are on pace to be only about a 20 to 25 point Democrat lead in returns by the time election day gets here, which is substantially
Wow.
improved
Right.
from
Right.
2020, and also with a lot less volume of mail.
Wow. Amazing. And another indicator for Eastern Pennsylvania is Kamala's shrinking margins in New York, right? Because if she's getting half the margins that Biden got in 2020 in New York, that's got to affect places like Bucks County. That's basically a New York sleepover county in Pennsylvania.
Well, that's the key of presidential elections, is the data doesn't just occur in a vacuum. When you want to really stretch this out, I did the research on New York, and since 1952, New York has moved to the Republican right 9 times from the previous election. So the shift has been Republican 9 times. In the other elections, obviously, the shift has been to the left. And in New York, in those 9 occasions, there are 5 states I've measured that I consider to be working class states, Trumpy states, Trump trending states. I went with neighboring New Jersey, then I went with Pennsylvania, which is also a neighbor, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Minnesota. Those are the states that are going to have a big swing on this election. And in 45 occasions, so 5 states times 9 cycles, in 42 of those occasions, the states that I was studying moved to the right from the previous election. There were 3 exceptions: Minnesota in 1956 against Dwight Eisenhower, which he still won, and then Wisconsin and Minnesota in '04, which to me looks like a readjustment from a large third party vote share in 2000. So two-party votes coming back in the system. And it was very minor. So what that means is when New York is shifting right, it's a working class traction that grabs onto other working class states. So what I mean by working class is non-college white voters. And the hallmark of the Trump campaign is the longer he's been a political force, the more diverse his working class coalition becomes. He was better with Hispanics and blacks last time. This time could potentially be Nixon 1972 stuff, where the returns surprise people to the point where some of my data, when I look back, the only time this thing's ever been Republican was 1972. That's because everybody said, we're not going with the socialist here. And
Yeah.
I'm not necessarily going to go all in on Cook County, Illinois, going Republican. But this is the type of election where some of these returns, with lower turnout and with a bigger share of minorities turning around and voting for Trump this time, you might find some very surprising returns.
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, I'm just looking at Miami-Dade. Even if Miami could do it, well, I know they have
It's
different.
going. Miami's going, and no Republican has ever carried Miami and lost the presidency.
That's what I was going to ask you. You again. This is what I love your analysis. I mean, you've found some fascinating correspondence between the way Pennsylvania votes and the way like Florida votes, going all the way back. I
Mhm.
think to the 1940s. Can you explain that?
Yep, Florida has a lot of working class voters, and it used to be white working class, but Florida's very ethnically and racially diverse. And Florida has a lot of working class voters from the Midwest that move down there, especially to the western side of Florida. So, as Florida goes, typically the sentiment of the voters in Florida is the same one shared by those in Pennsylvania and Michigan. And since 1952, they always moved in the same direction, until, of course, the safest and most secure election of all time in 2020, where Florida became 2.2% more Republican and Pennsylvania and Michigan went off to the left.
Right.
I tend to look at numbers, and that's another faction of my methodology, where I've got some polls I'll look at. New York's a great example. New York is constantly polling 9 to 14 points for Harris, constantly, not over 14, not really inside 9. So that's a shot group. It's like if you're going to the rifle range to qualify your weapon, you've got your bullets in a shot group. So we have a shot group in polling for New York, which suggests to me that they are measuring that, not realizing that, it's not going to Trump. but they don't realize that they need to rig that poll too, or it's a dead giveaway that the whole country is shifting in a different direction. So one of the things that I tend to do in my analysis is I could just consider historical fact. I'm a big baseball fan. And for a while, and I understand baseball statistics and history the same photographic way that I understand political data. And there's a term in baseball betting, which I'm not a better like on the gambling lines, but I liked some of those platforms where you could draft a daily lineup and put some money on it. And I never was that great at it. But there's a term called the chalk pick, CHALK. The chalk pick is this guy is constantly good. It's like a stock. You hold it long enough, it's going to get more valuable, even though day to day it may not. So my guy might go 0 for 4, but the chalk says that this guy hits left-handers really well, and if you draft him enough times, he is going to give you a good return. So here's a chalk pick for you. If Nevada's going Republican, then it's a really good bet that Arizona's going Republican too. And that's because Arizona has never voted for a Democrat presidential candidate when Nevada voted for a Republican one. And Arizona's been a state since 1912. So if you got Nevada going Republican, then to me, the right alignment, like a chiropractor would look at your body, the right alignment is Arizona's also Republican. Now, could there be a first time for everything? Absolutely. But I wouldn't bet on it.
Dang, you do something very similar with I'm just I think I might yes, you do something very similar with Wisconsin in relation to Iowa, something akin to the way Wisconsin votes in relation to Iowa. Can you flesh that out?
Yeah, the reason I have to do that is because some states do not register voters by party. Now, every
Right.
county has its own party ID. They just may not list it specifically. You have to,
And their polling is horrible. I mean,
right,
just
and you
for
have to.
some reason, polling Wisconsin is just a nightmare.
Wisconsin is a known nightmare for polling, and a lot of it has to do with access to the full electorate. So, in the northern parts of Wisconsin, that's some remote country. I drove through it one time in the wintertime, and I thought I was going to see Paul Bunyan and a blue ox coming out of there. But I hear Paul Bunyan's a pretty big guy. But when you look at Wisconsin,
As are you, Seth. We were talking earlier. Seth showed me a picture of him standing next to Trump, and he dwarfed Trump. Seth's a big dude, and you guys all know I'm not, so that's great. Keep
that's
going.
the
I'm
fun
sorry to
part
interrupt.
about when people finally meet me. They think I'm just some stats guy, but I look like an NFL tight end. But when you look at data like Wisconsin, it doesn't register by party, but it has a political cousin, and that is Iowa. It's a better match than Minnesota. Minnesota's too much dominated by one urban area, the Twin Cities. But Iowa, especially the northeastern portion of Iowa, where it runs along the Wisconsin border at the Mississippi River, very similar demographics. You got a lot of blue dog Democrats out there that are shifting hard Trump. The same area of Iowa trended hard in 2016 when Trump won it to the right of Texas. And that was why Trump won Wisconsin, was because he trended southwest Wisconsin so red. And I can't get party ID numbers out of Wisconsin, but I can out of Iowa. And Iowa has moved from R+1 in 2020 when Trump won it by 8 points, and it's now R+10. So Iowa is not going to be a competitive state. I would absolutely expect Iowa to go to Trump by 10 or 12 points or maybe even more. And Wisconsin has never been more than 9.8% away from Iowa since 1960 in any direction. So to me, the chalk pick is if Iowa's 10 to 12 points for Trump, then I don't have an example in the last 60 years or more of Wisconsin being far enough from Iowa to be a Democrat one state. And then there's other internal clues inside Wisconsin that suggest the same, like Milwaukee County's voter roll is reduced by almost 10% from 2020. That's a product of obviously voter roll corruption being rooted out, but also the city, and well, it's mostly the city emptying out population.
You mentioned black men going towards Trump in record numbers, but to add insult to injury, there does seem to be some data now, particularly coming out of early voting in Georgia, early voting in North Carolina, where the black vote is actually down. It's down significantly, possibly even to pre-Obama levels. We're talking like 20% a couple on some of these days in Georgia. Are you noticing that same decrease? I mean, if that's the case, this has got to be catastrophic. If it holds, we're talking about a lower black turnout for Democrats, but then of that black turnout, more are voting for Trump than ever before.
Correct. People, this is why I count votes. I don't count percentages as much as I count votes because there's only so many white liberals to go around. The Democrats have already lost the white working class. White liberals are being increasingly restricted to women. Men, Trump and the Republicans today are becoming the party of men of all races. And
Right.
this is where we have the potential to completely create a new coalition, especially now that we have libertarian types and non political types joining the ranks, like RFK and Elon Musk, which I'm fully supportive of. I am not so much a conservative. In fact, I hate the term, as I am a constitutionalist, a pragmatist. I am a
Yes.
populist above all. So
Right. Right.
when you think about this data, a few days ago, maybe 3 or 4 days ago, I saw a note that North Carolina Democrat strategists were up in arms because 67,000 fewer blacks had voted in the early voting than at that time in 2020. So that's been several days ago, but I'm sure they're still running a big deficit. What's been identifiable in places like Jacksonville, Florida, Atlanta, Georgia, and Charlotte and Raleigh, North Carolina, is a major decline in urban turnout. The black women, they are showing up to vote at their standard numbers, and they're usually 95% plus Democrat. My
Right.
understanding is that in Pennsylvania, Richard Barris polled it. He said that Trump was winning 11% of black women, which is huge. But
That's huge.
he was over 25% with black men. And when he pushed them, their margins were coming up over 40%
Unbelievable.
or of share of the vote. So
Unbelievable.
when you do the math on that, let's say that blacks were 30% of Georgia's electorate in 2020. That would be 1.5 million votes from black voters. And if Trump lost them 90 to 10, that would mean that he lost at 1.35 million to 150,000. So you got a gap of 1.2 million. But if you shift 10% of that your way, whether you gain 5 and they drop 5 as a result, you're talking about a swing of 150,000 margin in a state decided by 11,779 ballots. Because they don't have enough white liberals to go around, the young people are trending Republican. The white working class has left the Democrat Party. Hispanics are splitting probably down the middle of this election. Then what do they have left?
Right.
And that's why they need to replace the electorate demographically.
Right.
And it has
Exactly.
less to do it has less to do with skin color and race as it does desperately poor economic status.
Right, exactly, and then dangling a carrot in front of them, exactly, but I love the way you set that up because, I mean, were I a Democrat and you were giving me all of this data, I'm just getting this data analysis, in the end, I would say, well, what's our only hope? And somebody in the room would have to say, well, we've got to import a whole new group of voters. That's what we're going to have to do because of the remaining pool of legal citizen voters were shot. It's fascinating. You talked before the interview. We were talking about Harris leaner states. Can you talk about the one of the things I find again so fascinating about your analysis is right now as you're structuring it out, it's almost as if the so-called swing states are not really swing states anymore. If anything, you're kind of shifting the swing states elsewhere, and they happen to overlap almost, or actually not almost, exactly with Trump's itinerary over the next 11 days. Can you flesh that out for us?
That's turning out to be a pretty cool thing. Sean Spicer was really eyes wide open when we did our talk about this, and he cited my work a number of times. Now it's a very humbling thing to understand, and I believe that people in Trump's circle have now seen that interview. But I categorize things very simply. I'm a very linear thinker on a lot of things. And when I was out of work one time before I got into this giant mess, I was job hunting, and I had a job offer or a interview offer at a think tank, and they made me take a competency test, and it was basic skills, writing, math, and I had good scores in most things, average scores in others. And then one of the tests was they called it the bucket test. It was categorizing things. So they would give me 50 random terms and tell me to make 4 buckets to put all the terms in. So to see how I sort through things. So I scored a very high mark on that, one that they'd rarely seen at that high. So it's one of my skills is being able to break down complex things and put them into simple categories. I put all of my states into 3 categories. The first category is safe electoral votes or safe states. I could say states, but some of the states are broken down into congressional districts, Nebraska
Right,
and
in
Maine.
Nebraska. Yeah.
So my count on the safe and my definition of safe is 10 or more points. I believe that this electoral vote will go by 10 or more points. Some of those are starting to threaten that 10-point mark. I think I'm about to move one to Trump over 10 points, and I'm about to move several of the Harris states inside 10. But for the
Wow.
longest time, my score on the safe ones, the 10 or more points to the left or the right, was 191 for Harris and 179 for Trump. So that right there is 2/3 of the Electoral College. So if you can't predict 37 states, you don't have much business being in the elections predicting market. And then that leaves 13 states out there for scrutiny. And I call the next group the leaners. So a leaner is a state that I believe has an intended winner, where I believe I can identify the winner with great likelihood, but the margin is going to be less than 10 points. So I call them leaners. Most people have a lean inside 5, but this is my own proprietary model just for sorting these things out. So I've got the states that I call leaners, and I put 4 of them in blue. They are New Mexico for 5 electoral votes, New Hampshire for 4, Virginia for 13, and Minnesota for 10. And in that group, I also have Maine statewide for 2
Mhm.
and Nebraska second congressional district for 1. So I have those votes. That comes out to, I'm doing math here on the side. That comes out to 25 electoral votes leaning towards Harris. So that would put
Okay.
her at 226. And then on the Republican leaners, I have Texas and North Carolina. So 40 for Texas and 16 for North Carolina makes 56. I have never had North Carolina as a likely Democrat or competitive state, even though it's always thrown in there because of the registration trends. And now look what state is starting to break hard for Trump, just like I knew.
You're right.
So
Exactly.
so that's 56 for Trump. So that would begin our election for the decisive states at 235 for Trump and 226 for Harris. Now, it just so happens that those 4 states, the full states, New Mexico, New Hampshire, Virginia, and Minnesota, have been announced for Trump rallies because guess
Yep.
what? The seesaw has tipped in a way where those are now sliding down towards Trump. And Trump is going to go try to knock those states off. So when you put them on defense, now they can't pursue Georgia and they can't pursue Arizona and Pennsylvania. So they're screwed. Now that's a really good position to have. Trump's campaign right now reminds me of the Russians encircling Berlin in 1945. It's
Yeah.
like that. So then we go to the 7 decisive states. So why does Seth not think North Carolina is a decisive state? Because I have it likely to Trump inside 10 points. And now it would be decisive if for some reason it was ripped off and went to Harris. But my 7 decisive states where I begin my X's and O's, they are Georgia, Arizona, Nevada, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. So the 6 states where everybody was fighting over in 2020. And then the 7th one, which is the surprise to most people, is New Hampshire. Now,
Yeah. It's
I tend to
interesting.
believe that Harris has the edge in New Hampshire, but it's not a lock for her.
Yeah,
And
it's just, within the margin of error, it
and the
looks like.
reason I consider it a decisive state, it's not really so much decisive if she gets it, but it's decisive for Trump because New Hampshire plus Nevada equals 10 electoral votes. And when we're
Mm,
talking about post 2020 election world, 10
right,
electoral votes would replace the loss of Wisconsin and it would nearly replace the loss of Arizona, short 1 electoral vote. So those
right.
7 states are the decisive states. In 6 of them, I have favoring Trump. New Hampshire is the only one that I think is a slight tilt for Harris, and it came out to 6.9% on my pessimistic forecast, but it came out to Trump by a half a point in my registration forecast. So New Hampshire is absolutely in play. And if the bottom of her burrito rips open, you want some imagery? You ever been to a burrito shop for lunch and you packed it too full and the bottom just falls out?
Yeah, yeah.
So if her burrito falls apart this week, which I think that there's a real good chance after today it does, with Joe
Yeah.
Rogan and then the Madison Square Garden event,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
this is usually at the end where people start hurting their polls and everybody's, letting on to what they think is going to happen. I think they're going to have a
And also and Seth, we can't forget that disaster of an October surprise. That was just talk about a dud, my
I
heavens, but
mean,
I'm
look, so the guy ran for president in 2016 and 2020. So you didn't come out with this accusation then, right? So
right.
none of it is valid. And the problem is, even if something were valid, the boy has cried wolf way too many times
Yeah,
at
yeah,
this point.
yeah,
So
yeah,
it's been worn out, and plus people are sick of it. People understand the interference that's going on.
yeah.
So I've got the 7 decisive states. And when I put all those together, that would be Trump with 312 if he got the 6 without New Hampshire. And then if you give him New Hampshire and the others, then you've got an electoral score slightly over 340 electoral votes. So given
Wow.
the state of elections today, the state of corruption in elections, I can't see a Republican candidate with more than 350 electoral votes.
Right, right, given that, yeah. Yeah, Schweikert's been talking, 312 for several weeks now, so you guys are you're overlapping your analyses
And
there.
Michigan is the worst of those 6 that I have.
Yeah, yeah, I've seen that, right? They have registrations,
They've got
voter registrations that
83%,
outnumber.
83.5%. Last time I calculated it, 83.5% of their population, the entire population, is
Yeah,
registered to vote. But only 77% of any state's population is over the age of 18 and therefore
right.
old enough to vote. And then that's before we deduct people that are not eligible to vote for.
Right, exactly. No, it doesn't make any sense, and that just be par for the course, that nutty administration there. Seth, this is amazing stuff, dude. You are to be you're like a Michelangelo of data. It's just it's brilliant. Where can people reach you?
I've started being all over X lately, which it's not my favorite platform. I think that it's really an abuse chamber, but it's a very important. It's an important battleground right now for narratives, and this is why Trump is pushing the early vote. It's about narrative control. But
Yeah.
I'm on X at real S Keschel. I'm on Truth Social at the same at real S Keschel. Telegram, it's Captain Keschel's 2024 election headquarters. And then my long form analytical version of myself can be found at skeschel.substack.com, and that's where people can support my cause also.
You guys will have a link down below for all that, but particularly Seth's Substack. That's where I found him. As I found him on there, and then I started subscribing to his X feed, and I check him. I check you out every hour, man. I'm one of these guys that's stalking, mining your information.
Yeah,
I need stuff from my videos, right?
I
So,
know. I go to bed every night excited about finding the new data in the morning. And now that I'm out in Arizona, it's in the Pacific Coast time zone. So I wake up and there's already stuff rolling because it's 9
oh
o'clock out
yeah,
east. Yeah.
yeah.
So it's kind of fun to watch, especially when you see the onslaught going on in Florida, which is going to be R plus 10 by the end of the day. It was D
Oh,
plus one in the early vote in 2020. It's now R plus 10 and the early vote's only halfway done.
and remind me, am I correct? Didn't Miami Dade go for Clinton by like 30?
It went to Hillary by about 30 points, so 300,000 plus. And then Trump was inside 100,000 vote margin in 2020. And Miami's another tell that the 2020 election was corrupt. It's the only county with more than a million votes where Joe Biden lost votes from the 2016 totals.
Oh wow.
Yeah,
Oh
for
wow.
some reason that one didn't get blanketed with extra votes, but
Right.
Harris County, San Diego, Orange County, they all did. But
Right.
Miami-Dade County now has a Republican plus 2 or 3 turnout already, and it's only
Wow.
D+4 as party registration goes. So Trump's gonna win Miami, and that's gonna be something crazy. He might even win Palm Beach County if this keeps up.
It's so glorious. I did a video a few weeks back on the rise of the conservative city, of all the different conservative trends in cities, and of course, Miami's the king of the cosmopolises at this point.
Miami is
Uh,
Miami's definitely the hardest Trump urban area there is.
it is.
You've got some metro areas that are like Dallas Fort Worth is mild
Mhm.
Republican at this point. It's
Yep.
not like it was. You've got Maricopa County may roll back, especially with the Hispanic working class. Clark County, Nevada is looking like that too.
Yep. It's stunning. Yeah, the Latino voter realignment is huge. Like you said, I mean, you hit it all. White working class, non-white working class, populist realignment happening all over the world, in Europe, Latin America, here in the States, and it's redefining
There's
politics.
only
And
one state that registers voters by party that is more Democrat friendly than it was in 2020, and that's Colorado.
I was gonna say all the pot smoking.
It's only by a smidge. It's about a quarter of a point to the left.
Yeah,
But the
yeah.
independents there are really left leaning. So
But
Colorado,
even there, isn't Trump within single digits there? Did I
you know,
catch
I,
that
I
correct?
think that Colorado might fall into one of those states. I've got it at plus 10 for Harris or more. I've got it solid for her. But with enough Hispanic surge and a low enough urban turnout, that can creep inside 10.
Gosh,
But the voter
amazing.
registration index suggests it should go bigger than it did in 2020, but I don't think it will because the ballot count isn't out there like it was, and it was massively inflated in 2020.
Right, right. And they see, yeah, yeah. It seems like they started believing their own fairy tales, and now they're getting caught flat-footed here. So let's hope. Let's
Colorado,
certainly hope.
Colorado definitely is a political disaster. It is
Yeah,
not. It is certainly a blue state.
it's certainly a blue state for sure. Sadly, of course. Gang, make sure to click on the link below. Visit Seth's Substack, Captain K's Corner. That's what I go to. And make sure to subscribe to his X channel as well on all his different social media platforms. Like I said, I'm literally checking in with Seth's work every single hour. He's an amazing resource. going into November 5th and beyond. Seth, it's an honor to meet you, my friend. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks, Dr. Turley. It's great to be on your show, and thank you, audience, for tuning in.
It's an honor.